This daily 10-minute drawing exercise is a ruined medieval church somewhere in the north of England. I honestly can't remember the name of the place we were at. Now you'll notice I've put a pencil outline just for the outline of the actual image on the paper because I thought that would just help keep me within the right scale with the time pressure that I had. It just meant that I could reference some of these objects with the border of the overall image, which I thought would be helpful. So, as always, going slow at the start and hoping to pick up the tempo as I move on a bit. So this is going to be a challenge for a number of reasons. I'm starting with a 0.3 millimeter pen, and I switch to a 0.1 millimeter pen once I get past this very closest section of the church. Once we look through the two closest arches, I switch to the 0.1. Now, there's obviously a lot of stonework, weathered stonework, which is always a challenge to draw with a line, with a fine line of pen. And so I, in the end, decide that I'm going to do my best to keep it to 10 minutes, which means it is going to be tricky to really get too much of an effect for those edges. But all the same, I try to avoid too many long, continuous, sharp lines because they create edges that just don't really exist in this scene. So we'll see how successful that is by the end. There are a couple of obvious points where there are holes and knocked about bits that I try and capture just a little bit. And at the very end, I also try and capture the very uneven surface of the flagging for the floor. And I'm looking at the negative space here. I'm looking at the shape between that curve and the edge of the frame. And I probably should have brought it down a little bit more and brought it closer to the left-hand side of that column. So I'm now aligning this one with the one I've already drawn in terms of where the top of this support is, and the same with the ground. And this is where constant alignment when we have a reference. And if we're drawing from life, we can do the same thing. We draw the starting point carefully and then we align with what we've already drawn according to the alignment that we see either in our photo or in front of us. Now, a little bit of an effort just to try and map out the order in which I'm going to do things. Add in a few extra lines here just to indicate blocks of stone so that I start to get that feeling in my head as I draw, and also start to explore what marks might or might not be effective to represent that. Now, as we move further away, it's going to be a bit easier to do lighter gestural lines and still capture the effect. It's really in the most detailed, closest parts that we can see that the challenge is greatest to try and avoid actual lines. So I probably fussed a little bit too much with some details in this early section. And I noticed that this small column here that holds this central arch actually has a large similar structure on the far side of it that comes out and makes overall a fatter column, and that therefore the arch on the right hand side actually sits differently from the arches that we already have. It's always important to check what we're doing, and I didn't quite get that right. I did a mark for the bottom of that column up from the edge and then didn't quite notice that that mark was representing the bottom of the platform that column sat on, not the bottom of the column. So annoying, but nothing I'm going to spend any time worrying about right now. Time to push on. So trying to make sure these arches look okay from a perspective point of view, from a foreshortening point of view. And the main thing to remember is that the center part of these arches, these pointed arches, is not going to be exactly halfway between the two columns. It's going to look like it's further away than the first half, that it's closer towards the second column, because the visual compression as it moves away makes that half look narrower. Again, trying to get this detail here of a chunk of stone that's been taken out. At some point, it looks like something's been set in there for some reason. And now doing the same thing on this closest one. Now, I got a reasonable amount of this done in the 10 minutes. I'll tell you exactly when the 10 minutes is up. But I just thought it was a great image to draw. It would be a great image to do a longer drawing of. And if you'd like to spend more time on this than 10, 12, 15 minutes, can I suggest you use it for the 10-minute exercise, and then you redraw it as soon after that as possible and take as long as you'd like, and maybe really work on creating the effect of the weathered stonework, because it is a great subject for that. It would also be a great subject for using sketch marker to apply value with this nice darker section in front, and also a very dark shadowed area in the background, but with a lot of light values in between and all around them as well. I would certainly encourage you, if you really enjoy the lines and the shapes and the depth of this scene, to spend longer on it, but not to do it in that way as part of the 10-minute drawing. Part of what we want is, whether we do this in 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, is to have that sense of being pushed slightly, that we're having to keep going, that we can't settle back into the luxury of just, what will I do? But we gather a rhythm in our line work that pushes us forward a bit. As long as we don't ever feel that we're being careless in our marks. If we feel like we're being careless, then that's a sign that we've just pushed ourselves too far. And we either need to choose a simpler drawing for these exercises, or we need to give ourselves a little more time so that we still feel pushed, but that we're not feeling that we're drawing careless marks. So now I've switched to a 0.1, and again with these posts, I'm aligning them with the posts I've already drawn as best I can. So sometimes there's a little bit of compromise if what we're aligning with doesn't quite line up in every respect with every reference point we can now use. And this is more likely to happen later in the drawing when we've got more reference points to choose from. If one of them isn't quite in the right place, maybe it wasn't as obvious when we were actually drawing that part exactly where it should be, then we can find that we have to compromise a little bit, but in the end, always do what's going to look best in the drawing. Sometimes we can deliberately put in a slight inaccuracy to avoid a larger, more obvious inaccuracy somewhere else. And now, getting very close to the 10 minutes, but now doing this final arcade. I dare say we're looking down one of the naves of the church, and the space, not one of the naves, one of the aisles, one of the side aisles of the church, and the other colonnade, we can see the other sort of arcaded series of arches represents the border of the other aisle. And between the two, we have the nave. We have the main body of the church. That's how it looks to me. And down the far end, on the sort of left-hand side, through that first arch we see the remains of a tower that goes a lot higher than the rest of the structure. It really was really interesting to walk around. It was a shame it was so bitterly cold when we did it. Well, it seemed bitterly cold to me anyway. I think the locals we were with just put a coat on and didn't think it was any big deal. But it was still actually meant to be summer there. And so that's how far I got in my 10 minutes. So now we've switched to double time and a quarter. So it's just a little bit faster than the normal double time, just to keep the total down. But if you do want to see this slower, of course you can use the cog icon to make it half this speed, which would bring it back to almost real time. And if you're finding this interesting, if you're finding this series helpful, please hit the like button. And if you have friends who draw, why not share it with them? And a reminder, I do have all these on a playlist. So if you want to go back and see some of the ones that you've missed, if you haven't got 35, 36, I'll have to check the number of these already drawn, then there are plenty that you can go back and do quite easily. This reference photo will be on my channel community page, of course. And you can have a go using it, either screenshot and print it off, or just use it on a tablet or put it on your TV as well. I would suggest that you don't draw along with me. That can be tempting to do, especially when I'm drawing real time. But what you're most likely to end up doing is, because of the time constraint, is to focus on the end of my pen and the lines and the marks I'm making and seek to copy them, and actually lose the referencing of the photo, which is the key part. I would really recommend that you watch what I do, you hear any comments I make, any warnings I give, learn the lesson of any mistakes I've made, and then get the image, but not watch me actually draw it and seek to draw your own drawing. And then go back and compare what you've done with what I've done. That way, you're training your mind in the creative process of looking at the reference and working out what sort of marks you'll use to create that. And that's the hardest part of drawing, knowing what marks we're going to put and where we're going to put them and why we're going to put them there. That's the hard part, not the actual marks themselves. And if you just copy my mark making, you don't learn that key creative thinking. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. It is a great subject. So this took me about 14 or 15 minutes to draw in real time totally. I'm happy with it. It's a nice memory of a great place on a cold day with some friends we don't get to see that often. I hope your drawing of it at least gives you some good memories. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.